Cool. So I am here this evening with Janet Alexandersson, who I met perchance when I went to Gran Canaria last month. I was doing a talk at a local co-working space event, and I met one of the lady that does the Digital Nomad Girls, and Janet was a friend of hers, and we were together and we got talking. Turned out that Janet is a freelance lawyer who specializes in international contracts, which was very interesting to me, seeing as I had just stopped offering my own contracts and had started to recommend that people got them from somewhere else. I was getting some negative feedback about that, so that was something that I was going to look into, but I hadn't actually found anyone, so it was incredibly fortuitous that I met Janet when I was there. So what happened then was I asked Janet if she would make some virtual assistant documents for me and my readers. And so Janet worked with a few all-stars who were a little bit unhappy with the quality of the other documents that they had received. And you guys sort of worked together, didn't you, for a couple of weeks, I think, altogether, to get them perfect, because you needed to know exactly what the parameters of a virtual assistant's job was, really, didn't you, so that they would be spot on. They went back sort of revisions, a few revisions, and then we ended up, with the documents that we now have, which is fantastic. This is an interview with Janet, because I wanted to find out kind of what it is that virtual assistants actually need, because everyone's going mad at the moment with GDPR. And, even I am. I turn my phone on in the morning and I look through all the different groups, and I just think, I know for a fact that that's wrong. That information that someone's going, I'm trying to get my mailing list to opt back in. And I think, Christ, my head's exploding with it all. So, let's once and for all find out not only how GDPR will affect virtual assistants in particular, obviously, because that's what, we all are. We don't care about anyone else. And also what legal documentation a virtual assistant needs to have in place in order to protect themselves and be compliant, with all eventualities, really. And we're actually doing this interview just in the All-Stars group. So even though I'm going to share this later with the other groups, it's only All-Stars that are able to post their own questions and ask questions to Janet as well live. So thank you very much for finding the time to talk to me, Janet, and it's really good to see you.
No, thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Excellent. So first of all, my first question is, what legal documents do virtual assistants actually need? And why are there so many types of documents out there that we've seen? Do you think that the virtual assistants need all of these, or which ones do you think they need essentially to cover them?
I think essentially they need something that confirms that their client is their client and what is the parameters of their job. So that's the virtual assistant agreement. Mm-hmm. They need something that protects them if they have a website, so that they're not liable for whatever someone feels that their website should do or that it could have done to them. Mm-hmm. So that's the web policies with terms of service, privacy policy, and cookie policy. Mm-hmm. And that also corresponds to GDPR. And they need an associates agreement if they're subcontracting anything of their work. And finally, a data processing agreement if they are processing data on behalf of their clients. And this is very GDPR technical, and we can get in more to the details of that.
Fantastic.
So those would be the main things.
Okay, I want to ask you a little bit more about the data processing agreement, because when I first read it, I loved it. I was like, wow, this actually, because the thing is, virtual assistants are a data controller because they run their own business. So they keep clients' data for themselves. They have their own contact list, but mostly they do actually work as processors. And I remember you saying to me, which sort of was very surprising, which it makes sense now. It isn't just if they change or amend personal data for a client, it's even if they have access. So even if you were saying, even if they have the ability, like they can log in and they can change the personal data. So that would be things like a contact list, Facebook groups, mailing lists.
Yes. Everything where you can access the data that is someone else's that you didn't ask for.
Okay.
That is not there because you ordered it to be there, and you're still able to control that data somehow or manipulate it.
Okay. So, and in that case, you need this data processing agreement, and that will cover you. And so it basically, in a nutshell, says that it's the client has to be responsible for having permission to use that personal data?
Yeah. Yes. So that means that you as a processor can say that there is a purpose for you manipulating the data, but without it, you haven't had any contact with the person that supplied the data. So you don't have a paper trail to prove that you should be having access to this data, which is what the controller has on your behalf.
Okay, and that's what this agreement is for?
Yes.
So you have to get your client to sign it?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's also in their client's best interest because they are not allowed to let you access the data without an agreement like that. Because they want you to be GDPR compliant. If you are not, they are not.
Interesting. Okay. So okay, fantastic. And so what do you do if the client doesn't or hasn't signed the doc? You're not covered if something happens?
No, because then you don't have a legal basis for accessing the data.
So you shouldn't even be in there?
No. So you don't have to completely not work with that client, but you might say that I'm not going to do any work which requires me to do this data work.
Okay.
But they should really want this as well. So
because it covers them?
Yep.
Okay.
They need it.
Okay. Yeah, I found that data processing agreement really interesting. When I first read it, I was like, well, that is pretty much everything that a virtual assistant does. My own virtual assistant, has access to all those things, every one of those things, in fact, and as when I was working more as a virtual assistant, I did as well, I could get into my client's social media, and I did change the mailing list as well. And you were saying as well that they would need one of these, a data processing agreement for if they had associates as well. So as well as the associate agreement, they should use a data processing agreement too?
Yep. If you're manipulating someone's data, you need it with them. If someone is manipulating data on your behalf, you need an agreement with them as well. It's just going to change whether you're a controller or a processor.
Okay. And when we were having a chat earlier, I remember saying to you, well, what happens, should you have a data processing agreement, or does the client have one?
And it could go either way, but I think it's very good if you have your own, because then you can be sure that it's legally valid, that it says the things that you needed to say from your perspective. So if you get something from a client, exactly, it also might favor the client more than you. So I would have my own to make sure that I'm GDPR compliant and no one is kind of pulling something over on me.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, I'm just having a quick look at, okay, processing data also includes to look, i.e. access, not just change. So yes, that's what you were just saying. Basically, if you have the ability to even go in and change the data, then you need this data processing agreement to sort of prove, to give sort of validity as to why you're even there, why you're even being given access to see someone else's personal data, even if you're not, it's not yours. Yeah,
exactly. Okay. Yeah, because if you're a controller, you have a checkbox in your newsletter that you're allowed to process the data. They're agreeing, but as a processor, you don't have that. You don't have the first contact with the person.
We don't know who you are.
Data. No. So fantastic. You have to have the contract in place.
Okay, so even if you don't change any personal data yourself, even if you're not editing any details, the fact that you're even in there and you can access it, you have to have the agreement. Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Thank you very much. That's very firmly stated. Okay, my next question is website policies. So we've got 3 documents, haven't we, which is the privacy policy, terms of use, and that's sort of also called terms of service, isn't it? Sort of either or, and then the cookie as well, the cookie policy. Now, there's a little section that you can edit for third-party information. So what sort of third-party information would a regular VA need to add to these, and where would they find that information?
Yeah, so it's anything that you use as a software, as a plugin. So it could be Google Analytics. It could be a CRM that you're using. It could be Hotjar or AdWords, whatever you're using in your service. And most of these bigger companies now, or anyone who really wants to be GDPR compliant, are supplying some language that you can put in your policy to reference them, because they have information in their privacy policy about what their app is doing. So it's very clear what they're doing for you. So what you need to state is who you're using, what data you're collecting through them, how long you're keeping the data for, and the purpose of collecting the data.
Okay.
So that needs to be for every single.
So like who, how, why, and how long?
Yes.
Okay.
For every single app or plugin or third party that processes data for you. You have to have these in place. Yeah.
Fantastic. So that's great. So for someone like me, it would be different than like for regular sort of VA in a way, because I have analytics, because I have a Facebook pixel, etc., and because I take payments. Whereas a regular VA would probably just have maybe a mailing list, maybe
so MailChimp or exactly.
Google Analytics. Okay, and that those companies will have that wording for them.
Yep.
If they go and have a look. Excellent.
Fantastic. In most cases, they would. Yes. And if it's unclear how they process the data, you can always email them and say, I need something for my privacy policy. Can you point me somewhere? Do you have anything? And I guess a last case do-it-yourself option would be to Google privacy policies and the name of the business and see what everyone else has been writing about how it's processed. But because
they would have probably got it from the company.
Yeah. But if you've gone that far down the line, it's probably best to either talk to the company directly or have a lawyer do it for you.
Okay.
But in general, the big companies are supplying this for you these days.
Fantastic. I have got some questions coming up. I'm going to try and get to questions a bit later, but we've got a couple here, because one of these questions I was definitely going to ask later, which was about, would that apply to bookkeepers? And I remember you saying really that if someone's a VA and a bookkeeper, it's exactly the same information.
Yeah.
Just depends what the third party.
Yeah, it depends. It just alters which kind of data you're processing and how you state the purpose. So yeah, it's the same. So if you're a bookkeeper, you probably use some sort of software or online software. So that is what you have to state that you're using, for what purpose, what data goes in it, and how long you're keeping it.
Fantastic. So it's just that the third parties would change depending on the VA. Yeah. Well, this is fantastic, because one of the questions that's come up quite a bit is, can I use these policies, these website policies, for the client? And I remember you saying, well, you can't anyway, because you haven't got a license.
Well, not exactly, but but you can always buy they can buy an extra copy, you can buy an extra copy, but the thing is, it's very specific to the VA situation. If your client has a membership site, or if they take very specific payments, they have to explain those instances, both in the terms of use and also in the privacy policy. So you probably have to add that text to it. So unless the client has a very similar business setup that you do, you couldn't really use it.
Okay, so these website policies, as we originally intended, have been designed specifically for virtual assistants, and that if say your client wants some and they say, oh, can we just buy the same ones that you've got, then probably not, because they would just need to make sure that all the third parties in there were completely correct. But also, if they took bookings and you could log in and they took payments and things like that, it'd be completely different, wouldn't it?
It would be very different. But if it's a simple site, it could probably be used. So I think that the best way is just to ask. If you want to know on behalf of a client, just ask and we can tell you. Yeah.
Okay. Now, someone's asked here, just to mention as well, guys, with Be Live, now it's back on, it doesn't actually tell me who you are. It just says comment from Facebook. It won't give me your name or image anymore. It's obviously for GDPR with Facebook. So I can see your comments, but I can't see who's asking the question. So we've got a comment here. How would you handle unknown cookies that may be used because your site links elsewhere? I don't know what that...
I don't quite understand that question either.
Does that mean, do you mean like if you've put a link in a blog post or a page going somewhere else, like to LinkedIn or something? If you can clarify that question, whoever's written that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So
Cookies is not really so much about your website as it is about the browser.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Cool.
we'll see.
Okay, we'll find out what they meant by that. My other question is, so there is tons of information out there at the moment about GDPR, and I can see everyone going round and round in circles and all the different groups I'm in. And is everyone completely overthinking GDPR, and how will it specifically affect virtual assistants?
Yes, so I think people are overthinking because most of GDPR is targeted against big companies with big data. For virtual assistants, the way I see it plan out is that they're not really going to come after any one of you, especially not a solo practitioner. They might find a big VA farm type of business that they see is handling data inappropriately and go after them.
Like
but
an
in your
agency or
case,
something, like a big
exactly,
agency or something.
the most likely scenario is that a service that you're using is going to be targeted. So say you're using MailChimp or you're using Google Analytics, and they are targeted by the GDPR, and so they have a breach. They need to report, and if they don't know to report the breach to you so that you can report it as well, then you're not in compliance. So the most important thing you can do beyond having everything in place contract-wise is to make sure that you have points of contact with the services that you use. For Google Analytics, there's a data processing agreement, for example. You should have that updated and signed. The same for MailChimp, so that they know to contact you if your data has been breached with them so that you can report it. Because if they report your data being breached, but you don't, then it's very clear that you have failed your obligation and they might come after you because they were targeting someone else.
Okay, so as a virtual assistant, you need to make sure that you are updating all your information with the third parties that you're working with, MailChimp, etc., or your clients are. And so as a data processor, if they are breached, just to recap, if they are breached, it's your responsibility to also contact the EU.
Yeah, to also report the same breach, because they're going to report the breach in relation to you, and you have to report the breach in relation to the people whose data you processed. So you also need to inform the people whose data was breached that there was a breach. You need to inform the EU about what the potential ramifications could be of the breach and how you're handling it. So if you're not doing your part, they might target you as in the big sting that is meant to go for someone else. So you're essentially an innocent bystander in this, but with the proper contracts in place, you can be contacted, and these big companies all have data protection agreements that you can sign with them. So make sure that you're doing that. And if
I've been getting them from Google Analytics and Hotjar and stuff.
If you're using a service that hasn't offered this yet, it might be good for you to look into other services because you need this in place.
Okay. And this is all covered in the contract. It's in the freelancer contract, or is it in the data processing? I can't remember now.
It is covered in the data processing contract, but the big companies will supply their own data processing contract for you to sign. So it's not your data processing, it's them processing data on your behalf.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Cool. And now we have some questions that that the All-Stars wrote earlier on the page for you. Question one was, I think we answered this one actually in the group, but it was like, what information do they put in the section about insurance? You know, it was like sort of yellow and like put your insurance details in here.
Yeah. So you put down that you are insured, that who you're insured with, and to what amount usually.
Okay. Yeah. So you just mentioned it, and if you're not insured, you just take that section out.
Yeah, and if there's, that's essentially what it is. So be as brief as possible. You don't have to give them a lot of details, no insurance numbers or something like that. So
fantastic. Thank you very much.
So it's more you ensuring that you are insured.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So we asked this next one about the GDPR affecting bookkeepers, and they don't need to do anything different.
No.
It's the same. Okay. Oh, this was an interesting one. And it said, does Janet have a suggestion for a GDPR compliant email footer? Is this something that we should be using? Because Janet and I had a brief discussion earlier about this, and we were saying, well, actually, if it's in MailChimp or something, they have a footer. It's already there. And we think that you mean like in your general email, like an Outlook or Gmail or something, a GDP compliant email footer. And what was your thoughts on this, Janet?
In general, no, you don't need that. And if you are requesting data from someone, what you would want to put in a footer should already be in the text to have their permission, to state what you're using, the purpose of using the data, how long you're keeping it. That should be explicit in the request. And I think most of you will not really be sending requests for sensitive data that way. So the fact that you're just emailing with someone and by that getting their email address, that's okay.
So you don't need to have any type of, you don't have to change your email signature, you don't need any type of footers or anything special like that?
No.
Fantastic. Good. That's one less thing to do. Fantastic. So this is an interesting one. So someone said, I have some clients that are not doing anything about GDPR as they think it will not matter and they are only small fish. Will the freelancer contract cover me if I carry on working with them? Or do I need to add anything that says that I am compliant, but their stuff is up to them to sort out? They're good clients otherwise.
Yes. So the GDPR is kind of a chain reaction. So no matter how compliant you are, even if you have the best contracts in place and they're not compliant, you are not compliant.
So it's a chain.
So it's a chain. So if any link breaks their compliance, you're not compliant. But it might make it less of a case against you because you've been trying to get compliant. But if you're working with someone who you know is not compliant, you're not really doing your best to make sure that you are compliant.
So how about if they have, so I mean, we know that the freelancer contract won't cover them because the freelancer contract really just assures the client that you're GDP compliant. But how about if the person has a data processing agreement?
If they sign that, they're indicating to you that they are willing to be compliant and it's better for you. So always have this in place. But if it's a big client where you handle a lot of data, this will make it tricky for you.
And if the client won't sign the data processing agreement to say that they are GDP compliant, then you could be in trouble.
Yes.
Okay. So how would
if you're handling data without the data processing agreement, yes, you can definitely be in trouble.
Okay. So how would you, I mean, I guess this is a VA question rather than I suppose, a legal question, but how would be the best way to talk to your client about that and say, well, you rather than just say, well, I'm not working with you, you're not compliant, I'm not going to get sued, you're on your own, buddy,
Yeah.
Is there a way that would be recommended to talk to them about that?
I think the best way to approach this is not so much push the GDPR thing, but the insurance thing. So for you, you're probably not covered by your insurance if you're handling data without the proper safeguards anymore. It depends a bit what you're insured for, but
so the client, not the VA. Do you mean the client?
Both of them, yes.
So you won't. So if you've got insurance and the client's got insurance and they're not GDPR compliant, then their insurance probably won't cover them.
Not a data breach, no.
Okay.
That might be a good way of selling it because they're probably quite interested in having their insurance cover whatever it needs to be covering.
Yeah, if they're paying for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then it's not so much you being difficult as the insurance companies. So if you can just share that your insurance company won't let you process data because then you're not covered, and they might want to look into the same because it could be the same for them.
Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. That is a really good tip because I remember somebody actually asked me last week and they were like, God, seems so kind of forthright. It seems so like in your face, to say to a client, here's my data processing agreement. You've got to sign it, and yet it's the opposite. I've actually contacted my VA and said, can I have the agreement, please? Because I would like to really sign that now. So, nobody wants to get sort of, shafted. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
Okay.
So blaming it on the insurance is probably the easiest way out because then it's not so confrontational with you.
Okay. Fantastic. Yeah. Because you were saying, it's not actually that complicated. It's just that everyone's sort of really.
Yeah, I think it's just a new thing and people are so uncertain. And there's still a lot of things that GDPR doesn't even answer because we don't know how it's going to work in practice. So we can just do the best and make sure that you have a good case for saying that you tried your very, very best to protect your data. And having these contracts in place is all you need to do, and make sure that every single data point that goes through your company, either on behalf of someone else, on behalf of you, and then onto someone else, is covered by some sort of contract.
Okay. So the contract with the third party, they're sending it to us? we've been getting all those emails, haven't we? We're getting all those tons of emails from people saying, please resubscribe, even though I actually subscribed. So they've gone, that's the thing. I think we're seeing people do things that we know aren't really needed. And so I think that's when everyone goes, but if they're doing it, then maybe we should. And then also we've seen other contracts, where people have got data agreements and you've said, well, no, you don't really, a VA doesn't need that, or that's included in that, because it looks like a lot of people are trying to sort of make a lot of money by splitting up documents.
Yeah, I think this is an easy way for lawyers to, because it's a lot of fear going around. So it's easy to sell things to people that they don't really need. So even if you have a single client and the only data you're processing is theirs, then people might say you need a data retention agreement or something like that. But your VA agreement is structured that way. So you say, I'm working for this client for the specific purpose of providing this service. As a part of the service, I'm going to have access to this client system. It's quite natural that you have their data for your communication, for carrying out the service. And it's also limited to the duration of the service. So it's very clearly fulfilling the content criteria for the GDPR without being a specific agreement for that.
Fantastic. So the contract just covers that in general. You don't actually even need a data. You don't need these things that people are trying to sell separately.
Not if you are only working with one client handling their data, you're fine. Yeah.
Okay. Rather than handling data on behalf of a client, client's data. Yeah. A client's contact list and stuff. Okay. Yeah. What sort of advice do you think, what's your sort of parting advice? What advice could you give my audience of detail-orientated worriers and overthinkers, because that's what VAs are. They want to make sure that they're completely covered.
I think the best thing you can do is make a flow chart. So every data that you're coming through your company that's coming in, just make a flow chart saying, where does it come from? What do I do with it? Who do I send it to? And then make sure that every single one of those steps is covered by an agreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And that also is essentially what the EU would want to see in case there's a breach, so you're already prepared.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope that made it easier for everybody. So basically, we've just provided these different packs of things that's it. You've created those specifically for virtual assistants for the eventualities that they're going to come across based on what I, as a virtual assistant, and the other virtual assistants in the All-Stars have said that they do for a living, the parameter of their job. Fantastic. Also as well, just to mention that these documents, they are available, but also if the law does change and the documents need to be updated in any way, then Janet will just update them free of charge, and we will just upload them and they will just get resent to you via email. So you'll always you'll always have an up-to-date copy of that as well. So worth mentioning that too.
Yes.
Do we inform the ICO or someone else? I suppose that means if it's a breach.
You inform the ICO, but also start with the ICO and they'll point you on.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fiona said, yes, it was her Outlook. So yeah, no, Fiona, you don't actually, it says Fiona, that's how I know it's her. You don't actually need to have any type of email footer as well. So there's a long one. Hold on. Question from Anna. Suppose it was an analytics software breach like Google Analytics. You won't necessarily have contact details to reach the individual whose data has been compromised. For example, it might just be IP address, device details. Would you just put a banner up on the website directing people back to the analytics site, as well as reporting it as a breach to the governing body?
You should first report it because you only have so much time, but also putting up a general information. If you have newsletter subscribers, just send it out with a newsletter in a general way. So it's more important if your data was breached and you have a newsletter, that's more important than if it wasn't, or if you didn't have a newsletter. So if you have a newsletter, the data that was breached can be paired to the newsletter, subscriber, email, potentially, and then that chain can go on to getting more and more personal details about that person. But if the only thing that you collected about that person was their IP address, and that couldn't really be connected to other data, then you're probably okay. But it might be that IP address is connected with other data in other systems that is not even yours, that they signed up for something else. So it's just important that you report the breach, because then they can start to connect the dots that you can't, and either inform by newsletter that there was a breach, and also inform on your site that there was a breach, you might want to change your passwords or something like that.
Okay, so that's if people are logging in or something like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's have a look. Someone's put, what about wording on your contact page that links to your privacy policy? I don't think you even need it. Like with mine, I've just got in the footer, it just says privacy policy, and it's a link in my footer that just goes straight to that page. Yeah. So, or you could just say, Fiona, view my website privacy policy here. Doesn't have to be in detail. So this is a question about when we discussed insurance earlier. Do we mean indemnity or data protection? Most clients of mine only have public liability insurance.
So the insurance industry isn't quite caught up yet. But if you're handling data, you will need probably insurance for that in the future. So for what you're putting in the contract, it's the insurance that you have. And so it doesn't have to be something that is covering GDPR specifically, just mostly for something that is in the form of liability, indemnity for you doing your job incorrectly or something like that.
Okay. Just have a look. So we have, is the data processing agreement a standalone document that could complement existing contracts we may have in place, or we're best off issuing new snazzy GDPR contracts at the same time to clients and associates?
So you don't need a new contract. It's fine with just the data protection.
Yeah. So just get that as additional ones. Your contract's okay. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Cool. A flow chart per client sounds so simple. It's not. No, you didn't mean per client, really, did you? You just sort of mean like what type of information?
No, I mean for your entire business. Yeah, what runs through your business, not so much what runs through theirs. So every single piece of data that you collect, either if you have a newsletter, but also every single piece of data or like data type that you handle or process on behalf of a client, and whatever CRMs or plugins or softwares you're using to manipulate the data or have someone manipulate on your behalf.
Yeah. So actually, they're going to be, a lot of them are going to be the same. It will be like, right, those ones use MailChimp. This one, I have access to their email list. It's not actually going to be, as a VA, it's not going to be billions of different things.
No. So it would be one, if you use MailChimp for your newsletter, then you have a processing agreement with MailChimp. If you're using MailChimp on behalf of a client, you need a data processing agreement with the client, and they will have one with MailChimp.
Yeah. So you don't have to do another one with MailChimp. It's just sort of like knowing that, So they're really, again, overthinking it. You don't need to have like a flowchart per client. It's about a flowchart of the different types of data that's coming in and out of your business. And that's going to be, a lot of that's going to be exactly the same. Cool.
Yeah.
Law change is interesting, as Brexit will cause changes next year. Drafts are already on government website. As far as I was aware, Brexit wasn't going to change any of this because these are laws, these are EU laws. So you have to comply with this even if you're in America.
Yes, what's going to change is partly you're still going to have to comply to GDPR, but there might be UK rules that are more restrictive. And there might be changes in some other ways, but then, that's the next step of it, really. So
okay, so this is the beginning.
It's the same for a lot of different countries. Yeah, and it's the same in other countries. Canada is creating a similar set of agreements and laws, and they might be more restrictive and they might be less restrictive. So it's always going to be a monitoring situation. Yeah.
So these documents at the moment are as it stands because we are still part of the EU. And then when we leave, or if things change, then you'll add that to the document anyway, and add them, and we'll just send them out again. So that it's like, this is a new one, I'm afraid. And does that mean then that we'll have to get clients to re-sign it all again? Another data protection, I suppose, because I want to be compliant, won't they?
Yeah, it depends on what's in the current data protection agreement, and if the law needs to be involved in that and you need to change that part, then yes, you need to sign new agreements.
Okay.
Yeah.
God, it's like you haven't got enough to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, just here's all these things that you have to do. But I suppose, it's just you've got to kind of suck it up, haven't you, I suppose?
I think in my just general prediction is that no one's going to change it until we've had some court cases. So
then they might tweak it.
Yep.
Okay.
To see how it works in practice.
Okay. Okay, well, there's no more questions at the moment, so let me just give it a minute just in case someone's madly typing away. Okay, but as far as you're concerned, we've got the 4 documents that cover them completely, or 4 different packs. GDPR compliance. They need to get the data protection if they can even access their clients. I love data protection stuff. Freak.
That's nice.
They can't even see who it is. See what
I like this person.
And that actually it's just really been overcomplicated, in your opinion. That it's just sort of like, it's always, as well, it's not even just data, is it? It's always personal data. So as we've said, is that data something that can be used to identify a person? So as long as it's an email address with a name, then that's personal data. Exactly.
And it's also a lot of the hype that you see online is directed to the entire GDPR, and a lot of it doesn't apply to VAs. A lot of the harsh agreements are directed towards companies that collect biometric data or biological samples from people to protect your medical history. So it's more about personal integrity than protecting your IP address. Okay. So it's very different parts of data that is being retained, and very different set of levels of panic that should be had for different people.
Okay. So someone said, this has been brilliant. I need to go back to one of my clients and tell them they need to have all these agreements with MailChimp, etc. They are going to cry. So really, it's not, easier. I mean, sorry?
You just go to the website and download it and sign it. You're fine.
Yeah.
It's easy.
I mean, they're sort of sending you stuff. Yeah, they've been sending me stuff anyway and saying, here's a thing. Generally, I've had to just go, like with Google Analytics, I think I just logged in. I had to say how long I wanted to keep the information for.
Yeah.
I chose I actually didn't know what to put, so I Googled it, and somebody went, well, I went for the one that's the shortest amount of time. So I thought, well, I'll do that one then. So now I know.
And it doesn't really mess with your statistics. It just tells you how long you're keeping the data, but you can still retain the outcome of the data. So
yes, that was what I read. So I can still see exactly the analytics data, but yeah, it's not then stored. So it's kept the information, and then the details are gone. And it was actually really good, because before that I was like, well, I don't even know how long it's kept for. Yeah. Really, I was like, what is it again? Where would I find that again? So actually the fact that I ticked a box and chose it, I was like, haha, I now know how long I'm keeping that data for. But these companies have actually just been contacting me and saying, I haven't even needed to sign anything really. It's just been go to here and read these things again and just click to say that you're okay with that.
Yeah. If you're signed up, if you're a customer, they're just going to have you click through and record your consent that way. But
that was anyway.
And also provide a point of contact. So with Google Analytics, you provided an email address or a point of contact for them in case there's a breach, and it should be the same with the other ones.
Yeah. Let's have a look. Someone's written, a prospective client I met this morning. She hasn't thought about GDPR. I feel I shouldn't progress with her, but she's potentially a fabulous client. I don't want to risk my insurance. So
double check with your insurance what they say.
Or just get her to.
Yeah, but if you want to risk it with the EU, it's very unlikely that they're going to come after you, but it's also a 10 million euro fine if they do. And so it's kind of what the insurance says as well, if they are caring about this.
Yeah, so insurance, they're not going to take any risk with that, I imagine. They're going to be like, well, no, we're not going to cover you because we have to, we're not paying it. Yeah. It's your responsibility.
But the question is also, are you already covered? So that's also a conversation to be had, I think.
In the insurance already.
Yeah.
Oh God, who wants to read an insurance document? How? Well, you probably, because you love that sort of stuff. That's what you do. Oh my God. Okay, and also I suppose as well, because what I think that VAs are running the risk of is that read on behalf, you can't have GDPR insurance. It's not really GDPR insurance.
No, it's more what you're liable for in case you're mishandling your duties somehow.
Okay. Yeah. So it's not about GDPR. It's about how you're mishandling your duties.
What you can be liable for in case of something.
Okay. So if you're not doing your due diligence,
we can kind of round up a bit more information about this because I haven't prepared the insurance part. So we can probably share that later on.
Okay, yeah, we didn't discuss insurance,
Yes.
did we? So let's have a look. We'll find out. So there isn't actually any GDPR insurance. It's more that you need to be doing or due diligence as a VA. Otherwise, your insurance won't cover you because it will say when you're not doing your bit. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, they've put, makes sense now. Okay, good. I was like, this is going to make it all easy for you. And suddenly I'm like, oh my God, we're discussing insurance. Okay. There was a question that I was going to have. Oh, yeah. So I think what I would be concerned about as well is that clients, because the VA is going to say, hey, I can't work with you if you're not GDPR compliant. Now, someone else, like a web developer or something, they're just going to go, okay. But because if it's a VA and the type of relationship they often have, because it's quite intertwined with someone's business, that VA is going to get caught up in the client saying, okay, well, do you want to sort it for me? Because a VA isn't a legal expert, they're barely managing to get their own sorted. So I would be worried about that myself, that my clients are going to want me to suddenly become a GDPR expert, and that's all I'm going to be doing for months.
Yeah. If you can be choosy, I would choose the easy clients that are already concerned about GDPR and doing their best to keep up with it. For you to make them GDPR compliant is quite risky because you would have to have full access and even know to ask questions that they might not even know that you should be asking. They might have signed up to services that they're no longer using, but they still have data in it. So to map their business without having the history of access and also full access is very, very difficult.
So what should the client, what should a VA recommend to the client that the client does? Who should they contact and go to?
They need to have their own data protection mapped out and data flow. And they also need to be interested in having the correct web policies and be concerned about having a data protection agreement with you as a VA, then they're probably ready. If they're saying that GDPR doesn't apply to them or they're not concerned, they're probably not going to be safe enough for you to work with. But on the other hand, it's difficult to measure the risk of them actually being targeted. It's how much you want to be safe.
So it's basically whether you want to take the risk or not.
Yeah.
Okay. I can imagine the hearts and souls of some of these VAs has just gone frozen cold. We're just like, oh my God, it's hard enough to get clients as it is, let alone, going, so GDPR, at that consultation. Yeah.
One of the interesting things could be how does your business work? How to kind of map out for yourself without being so obvious what kind of data they're retaining and what kind of services they're using. So if they're using very well-known ones, they have quite good processes already set up, and you might be able to influence them to actually sign an agreement with Google Analytics, for example. But if it's more of a startup environment, and they're processing very sensitive details about people, it's more of a risk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Right. Let's have a look. Is there any more questions? It doesn't seem to be. I think I'm just going to have a quick look down and just make sure. Okay, so basically they can just do their due diligence. They can take the risk in summary, they can take the risk if they want to, but really, at the very least, they should have the data processing agreement, because the contract has an assurance that they are actually covered, but the data processing agreement actually covers them. Yeah, and if the client won't sign it, then really they should be wary.
Yeah.
Because they could be liable here. So. Okay, and a good way to get a client to sign it if they're not sure, or to start doing GDPR, is to say, well, your insurance might not cover you. Your business insurance might not be valid if you are not, if you're not looking after people's data correctly.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good summary.
Okay, excellent. Hey, good, I got it. Because I was like, oh, mind blown. It's sort of later in the day now as well. Okay, fantastic. That is wonderful. I think that's it now. So thank you very much for your time, Janet. And you're in the All-Stars group. And like I say,
yes.
These guys have actually been the ones that have had access to you to be able to ask questions like this. So Janet is in the group. You can sort of run some questions by. But if it's very, very specific, then you might have to email Janet, and she might need to work with you separately in order to do that, or maybe to work with your client potentially as well. If they want something drawn up, you could potentially do that too. Okay.
Yeah, no
Marvelous.
problem.
Excellent. Marvelous. So thank you very much for your time, and nice to see you guys, and we'll see you all later.